So again, my name is Chuck Rohrig. I'm a senior IT enterprise architect. I've been in the information technology business for more than 20 years at this point. I briefly ran a Bitcoin miner, and this will be my third halving event. So I'd like to share with you a little bit about what I've learned through all my experience. I'm going to try and keep it short. There's a lot of information to cover, but let's go ahead and get going. So before we dive too deep, I want to just cover a little bit about the facts that we know that are historical and just a little bit about Bitcoin. So number one, there will never, ever be more than 21 million Bitcoin mined, or there'll never be more than 21 million Bitcoin in existence. When it tops 21 million, there will no longer be any additional Bitcoin at that point. Number two, there are currently 19.6 million of those 21 million that are currently in circulation. This means that they're available to purchase. The other 1.4 or so million Bitcoin have not been discovered at this point. They will be discovered through a process called mining, which we're going to talk about today. Number three, many of you, especially since January here in the United States, have purchased your Bitcoin through an exchange traded fund. These were released for the first time in January of 2024. I believe there's 9 companies offering these exchange traded funds, including Fidelity and BlackRock are the 2 biggest ones. I just want to make sure that you know that when you're buying these exchange traded funds, you're actually buying an ETF share, which then owns a portion of Bitcoin on the back end, but you don't directly own the Bitcoin. Your share is equivalent to these Bitcoin. The Bitcoin are then purchased by Fidelity or BlackRock. So one share of an ETF does not equal 1 Bitcoin. So for example, if you buy 1 share of the BlackRock ETF, that would be equivalent to about $35, and that would be equivalent to 0.00052 Bitcoin. So you can see that it represents a lot fewer Bitcoin. Number 4, as of today, the price of a Bitcoin is approximately $69,000. And then number 5, this presentation is about Bitcoin mining. It's not about Ethereum, Solana, Chainlink, or any of the other digital currencies out there. They sometimes get linked to Bitcoin because, again, they are a digital asset. So all of the facts I just told you will not be changed with this mining event. So again, the price will not be changed. The number of Bitcoin that you own will not change. The number of ETFs that you may own do not change. This mining event only impacts the amount of Bitcoin that are rewarded to miners as an incentive for mining the Bitcoin. That is the only thing that will change during this halving. Okay. Moving on, a little bit more Bitcoin background about Bitcoin. All Bitcoin have been created, all 19.6 million Bitcoin that are on circulation have been created through a process called mining. There are approximately 1 million miners. We're not really sure exactly the number, but there are approximately 1 million miners throughout the globe. Some of these are based in Texas. Some of these are based elsewhere in the United States. Some of these are based around the world, China. There's other countries that are mining. There are also private companies that have big computer setups that are mining Bitcoin, as well as there are individuals, potentially somebody in their attic or someone in their basement that is also has a high-powered computer that are mining. In order to mine, you need to have a powerful computer. So you could mine on something less powerful, but more than likely you would never have enough processing power and you'd be wasting your time. So all miners have very high processing power computer, very expensive, and not all the miners have the exact same computers. Obviously, some miners have more powerful computers than other, and they would be more likely to discover a new Bitcoin if that is the case. One thing about these miners, this network of 1 million or so miners, is all of them are running the exact same Bitcoin code. This code is what tells the miners that it'll never be more than 21 million Bitcoin. This is the same code that would reward a miner with an incentive. This same code has all the rules about Bitcoin. It cannot be changed because all of the miners own this equally. And so it would take all million miners to agree to change any aspect of the code. At the same time, these miners also own all the ledgers. So we know every Bitcoin that's been traded to every individual, every one of these miners would keep track of that ledger as well. So essentially what a miner does is, again, they have very powerful hardware and software that they utilize. It's all exactly the same software. And essentially what they're doing is they are generating some cryptographic number. And this is very high processing power equations that they're doing. So essentially think of this as that they're solving a very large mathematical problem. And that's essentially what a miner does. The first miner that would solve this mathematical equation will be incented a reward called a Bitcoin reward. So I'll show you later in the presentation what those rewards are. And once they solve this mathematical equation, then all the other miners know that this has been solved, and now they start solving the next equation. And this continues, this process continues. So an equation is solved, it takes roughly 10 minutes to solve it, and then a new equation will then be solved. Every time an equation is solved, that miner will win the Bitcoin incentive or the Bitcoin reward. So it takes roughly 10 minutes to solve. So I say roughly because some miners may be able to discover this solution greater than 10 minutes, and sometimes it takes a little bit longer, but on average, it's about 10 minutes to solve this equation. And again, this is using the processing speed of potentially 1 million miners out there around the globe. About every 2 weeks, there is a difficulty adjustment. So if it looks like these miners are solving the equation in a little bit less than 10 minutes, this equation gets a little bit more difficult. And that is to adjust to make sure that this happens about every 2 weeks. And this difficulty adjustment happens within the code, and it occurs every 2016 blocks, which is roughly 2 weeks. But again, if these miners are solving the equations in a lot less time than 10 minutes, this mathematical problem will get a little bit harder. And if it's taking them roughly 12 minutes or so, or more than 10 minutes to solve, then this equation will get a little bit easier. And this, again, occurs every 2 weeks. So now let's just dive into a little bit about the things that we know about the Bitcoin halving event. Again, the price of the Bitcoin will not be affected. The number of Bitcoin that you own will not be affected. The number of ETFs that you own, nor the price of that ETF will be affected by the Bitcoin halving event. The Bitcoin halving event. So right now, every miner that is mining Bitcoin, when they solve one of these mathematical puzzles, is rewarded 6.25 Bitcoin. And again, this is an incentive for them to keep the Bitcoin network secure. It's an incentive for them to keep track of who's owning and who's traded Bitcoin. So again, 6.25 Bitcoin are rewarded about every 10 minutes to the Bitcoin miner that solves that mathematical equation. So about 900 Bitcoin per day are mined. About every 210,000 blocks, which is roughly 4 years, which is the date that is coming up, a halving event occurs. And this will occur throughout the rest of the history of the Bitcoin until all 21 million are solved. So the next Bitcoin halving is coming up next week on April 19th. And again, that's a central time zone. So if you're a different time zone, it could be April 20th, but that's when the next Bitcoin halving is occurring. At that point, the Bitcoin miners that are solving these mathematical equations to be incentivized and to secure the network will now be rewarded 3.125 Bitcoin. So today, for the last 4 years, they've been rewarded 6.25 Bitcoin every 10 minutes. The new reward or the new incentive will be 3.125 Bitcoin every 10 minutes. And that is only going to one miner that solved that complex mathematical equation. And so you can see we've cut the number of Bitcoin that will be mined from 900 a day down to 450 a day. So this is the fourth halving that has ever occurred in the history of Bitcoin. You'll see there in 2009, that was the initial launch of Bitcoin. And at that point, Bitcoin miners were incentivized by winning a reward of 50 Bitcoin when solving that complex mathematical equation. And then you can see in 2012 was the next halving event, 2016. The last one occurred in May of 2020. And that is when the Bitcoin rewards were cut to 6.25 about every 10 minutes. And as of April 19th, that reward will now be 3.125. This cycle, this Bitcoin halving, will occur 28 more times in the history of Bitcoin. All 21 million Bitcoin are projected to be mined by the year 2140. And at that point, there'll be no more halving, there'll be no more mining of Bitcoin. All Bitcoin will have been mined at that point. So let me give you a little bit of historical facts as what has occurred after the past 3 Bitcoin mining. We know a couple things. So the first thing is that regardless of the Bitcoin mining, demand continues to rise. So in 2020, there were an estimated 23 million holders of Bitcoin. Just earlier this month, there were 46 million holders of Bitcoin. So you can see that number of holders of Bitcoin has nearly doubled in the last 4 years. This is following the rise of the technology S-curve. So if you know how technology is adopted, so many of the very famous products like the iPhone, like the internet, have all followed this S-curve of the technology adoption. The internet was at the time the fastest growing technology in history, followed by the iPhone. And right now, it appears as though blockchain is the next highest increase in demand in history, and that has only been trumped by AI. And so we continue to follow the increase in demand. Increase of demand is also, we see things that countries are starting to adopt it, companies are starting to adopt it. It appears as though next week an ETF will be approved in China for Chinese investors to invest in Bitcoin as well. So we see demand continuing to rise. The next thing that has happened after every halving is that the supply, the available supply, so again, we have 19.6 million Bitcoin, but the available supply that is there to purchase on exchanges has continued to decrease. That doesn't mean that an owner can copy their Bitcoin from maybe a private wallet into an exchange to sell. It just takes a lot more effort. So in 2020, on exchanges, there were 3.2 million Bitcoin that were readily able to buy. In 2024, that has decreased to 2.3 million. And so what we also know is that with the halving event, the number of Bitcoin that are available in circulation will be 450 less per day because of the Bitcoin mining halving event. Let me also give you a little bit more historical performance about the price of Bitcoin. So you'll see after every halving there that the number of Bitcoin in 2012 has increased by about 9,500% after 380 days. So after approximately 1 year, it has increased 9,500%. Same thing has happened in 2016 over a course of about 2 years. And in 2020, it was a little bit less, but still 793% over just less than 2 years. I've provided a little bit more context. Generally, what happens typically right after the halving, in the days to the months after the halving, is the price does dip, it does go a little bit lower, or it does move sideways. But generally, over the next 1 to 2 years, you can see the performance. So we don't know what's going to happen in 2024, but this was a little bit of the historical performance of the past 4. So with that, let me just wrap up by giving you a quick summary of what we just talked about. So number one, the number of Bitcoin in circulation will remain the same. The number of ETFs in circulation will remain the same, and the price of both of those will remain the same. But that price will be determined by supply and demand. So again, there could be a lot of excitement about the Bitcoin halving event, raising more increase in demand. The supply on exchanges continues to go lower, and those things will definitely determine what the price is going forward. Number two, the one thing that will be impacted during this Bitcoin halving event is that the number of Bitcoin that is rewarded for an incentive to the Bitcoin miners will decrease from 6.25 to 3.125. And this will occur on April 19th in Central Time Zone, April 20th in other time zones. So that is something to keep track of. And that is the main thing that will be impacted in this halving event. The next thing I want you guys to remember is the Bitcoin halving event happens every 4 years, approximately, until the last 21 millionth Bitcoin is mined, which will be in the year 2140. Finally, the price will not be halved. The price will continue to stay the same, but will be based on supply and demand. And then finally, there are, for those that are interested to know exactly when the Bitcoin halving will occur, there is a Bitcoin halving clock that is out on the internet, and I put that in the presentation. And you can go out and watch the clock. It does say in the Central Time Zone, it's still tracking to April 19th. This could get pushed back to the 20th, what we're kind of seeing, and you can see down to the second when this halving event will occur. So with that being said, I appreciate everyone joining me today, and I hope I was able to give you just a little bit more information than you already knew about the Bitcoin halving event. If you have questions, I ask you to please reach out to me. It can be found on Twitter at whatsupchuck22. You also have my LinkedIn information, so I encourage you to reach out to me with any following or additional questions. So with that being said, I hope that everyone has a great spring afternoon. Enjoy the rest of your Friday and have a great weekend. Thanks, everyone. Take it easy. Bye.